Search is everywhere. The question is, are you showing up? This is Search as a Channel.
You know that feeling when you're like a marketing leader, an agency owner, or maybe someone making the big strategic calls, and you're just scrolling through your professional feed over morning coffee?
Yeah, looking at your media spend and your customer acquisition costs.
Exactly. And suddenly, like, every other headline is screaming about mandatory artificial intelligence watermarking.
Right, and the immediate assumption from the C-suite is always that brand equity is just about to evaporate. There's this total knee-jerk reaction. They think any content touched by automated tools will be instantly penalized or, publicly flagged in a way that just destroys credibility.
Which puts you in a terrifying position. I mean, you're sitting there looking at your brand's entire content strategy, the engine you just spent the last year optimizing to drive down production costs. And you're wondering, is all of this suddenly a liability? Are my posts going to get buried by the algorithm?
Like, do I need to legally prove every single sentence was handcrafted by a human?
Yes, it's so stressful.
It's the classic regulatory panic cycle. We see a new tracking metric from the big tech companies or a new compliance mandate, and marketers immediately assume the current playbook is dead. But based on the stack of industry memos and tech analyses we're looking at today, that panic is entirely misplaced.
Because we really need a massive reframe here right at the top. The panic over watermarking is a complete distraction. The real battleground for businesses isn't about hiding the fact that you used automated workflows.
No, not at all.
It is about surviving a reality where the cost of producing content has essentially dropped to zero. And when anyone can manufacture an infinite amount of text or video for practically free, well, distribution and consumer trust become the absolute only scarce assets left. Okay, let's unpack this.
To understand why distribution is the actual threat to your ROI, we first have to look at what the tech companies are actively doing with these watermarks under the hood. It is fundamentally not the definitive, reputation-ruining gotcha tool that the headlines suggest.
Because you read those headlines and it sounds like this inescapable digital fingerprint. But let's look at the mechanics. What actually is a text watermark? It's not a visible stamp.
No, it's mathematical. When a large language model generates text, it's essentially predicting the next word, right? It has a list of possible tokens or words it could use.
Right.
So what a watermark does is quietly divide that vocabulary into a green list and a red list. It forces the system to subtly favor green list words at, highly specific, mathematically pseudo-random intervals.
Okay, so instead of choosing the word buy, the algorithm is mathematically nudged to choose purchase, for example. And it does this in a sequence that a detection algorithm can later recognize as statistically improbable for a human to write by chance.
Precisely. It weaves a subtle statistical pattern into the vocabulary choices. Major tech labs are currently rolling this out on the text and files their systems generate. It's largely driven by compliance, actually.
Oh, like the European technology regulations?
Exactly. They demand it. The labs are legally mandated to mark these outputs in a machine-readable format to provide a safeguard.
But our sources point out a fascinating contradiction here. Hasn't one of the absolute biggest tech companies out there actually been utilizing this exact green list watermarking on its outputs since late 2023?
They have. It has been running quietly in the background for years. Millions of businesses have been using their outputs, completely unaware.
And the internet didn't break? Consumer behavior didn't fundamentally shift at all? The fact that the industry panic only started recently, when a different company made a highly publicized announcement about it to comply with EU laws, well, it proves that the fear is largely psychological.
It really is. Marketers are terrified of algorithm volatility, but they're fundamentally misunderstanding what the watermark represents.
It reminds me of those allergy warnings you see on a mass-produced candy bar. You know, the processed in a facility that handles nuts label.
That's a great way to put it.
Right. It's essentially a contact trace. It tells you that contact with a machine happens somewhere along the supply chain. But it doesn't tell you if the final product is a brilliantly researched gourmet white paper or just a plate of flavorless generic mush. It's an allergy label for content. It proves contact, but it absolutely cannot prove quality.
And beyond proving mere contact, it's an incredibly fragile label. The technical research in our sources shows how weak these statistical patterns are in practice. First of all, the detection algorithms require a minimum length to even identify the pattern.
Really? How long?
Usually they need around 100 words to confidently spot that mathematical sequence of synonyms.
Meaning short form copy, like a punchy social media ad, a LinkedIn comment, an email subject line, none of that would even register.
Exactly. The system is structurally blind to short-form content. Massive blind spots. Furthermore, they don't specify how much of a longer text was machine-generated.
What do you mean?
Well, was it just the opening paragraph that was brainstormed using a prompt, while the remaining 50 pages were painstakingly researched human analysis? The watermark doesn't differentiate. It flags the entire document all the same.
Wait, hold on. If major tech labs are spending millions of dollars developing these statistical watermarks for European compliance, how is it possible that they are so easily defeated? Surely they anticipated people trying to scrub the tracking.
They did. But there is a fundamental flaw in relying on specific vocabulary choices for tracking. Research shows these marks can be scrubbed out using what are called paraphrasing attacks.
Paraphrasing attacks.
Yeah, you basically take the watermark text and run it through a secondary open source language model with a simple prompt to rewrite or paraphrase the document.
Which instantly scrambles the mathematical pattern of the green list words.
Exactly. It completely destroys the statistical sequence. The watermark just vanishes.
But doesn't that require a level of technical sophistication? I imagine that must cost a significant amount to deploy at scale.
Well, it does require setting up a basic API pipeline, so it's not something the average casual user will do manually for a single email. But for an operator looking to mass-produce content, the financial barrier to entry is effectively zero.
Wow.
Yeah, the studies in our source material show it costs roughly 88 cents in API computing power to effectively rewrite 1 million words and remove the tracking entirely.
88 cents for 1 million words? That's insane. That completely invalidates the idea of watermarks as a security barrier.
It really does.
I mean, anyone whose business model relies on spamming the internet can bypass the multi-million-dollar compliance system with the spare change in their center console.
What's fascinating here is watermarks are ultimately just a legal liability shield for the tech giants. They raise the cost of low-effort abuse by a fraction of a cent, but they don't solve the core issue of content quality.
Right.
Think about it strategically. If a weak operator uses automated tools to mass-produce generic, boring filler, the output is worthless, regardless of whether it have a watermark. Conversely, if a strong marketing team uses those same tools to rapidly synthesize deep research, structure complex arguments, and edit a brilliant first draft, the output is highly valuable. The watermark is just a red herring.
So if watermarks are just fragile little stickers that anyone with an API key and $1 can scrape off, how are the platforms, the entities that actually control distribution and user retention, dealing with this tidal wave of cheap generic content? Because without a reliable watermark, they have to be absolutely drowning in it.
They are. The volume of production has scaled exponentially, and the platforms realize they cannot rely on compliance watermarks to save their user experience. So they are ignoring the production side and attacking the distribution bottleneck directly.
Because the production cost of an article or a video is near zero, the platforms controlling our feeds are actively choking the reach of generic commodity content. The industry term for this content, which is starting to appear in all the strategy memos, is slop.
Slop. It's a crude term, but it perfectly encapsulates the economic reality of the content. It's featureless, mass-produced, digital gruel designed purely to occupy space.
And these platforms are fighting back by building what we can think of as digital immune systems. They are developing antibodies to flag, throttle, and essentially catalog low-value content. And once an account is flagged, they suppress its reach even faster the next time it tries to post.
We have to look at the tangible business impact of these immune systems because it is staggering. One of the major professional networking platforms is now actively limiting the algorithmic reach of generic, low-effort posts to just a user's immediate network.
Which, if you're a casual user, sounds fine. But if you are a CMO running a brand account or an agency trying to build top-of-funnel awareness,
it is a death sentence for growth. Losing reach beyond your immediate network connections can cost an active brand account up to 71% of its total potential impressions.
71%. You are pouring marketing budget into an automated content engine, and the platform is quietly dropping 71% of your outputs into a soundproof void.
And the suppression isn't just text. One of the major video platforms recently conducted a massive sweep. They targeted channels that were utilizing automated scripts to pump out low-effort, emotionally manipulative, repetitive videos, the platform erased 4.7 billion lifetime views from those channels.
Wait, billion with a B.
Billion with a B.
That's a terrifying precedent for any brand relying on volume. Billions of views deleted because an algorithm recategorized the business model as spam.
And the financial fallout is immediate. That wipeout deleted nearly $10 million in annual ad revenue for those channel operators overnight. We're seeing the same thing on massive forum sites, which are now blocking millions of spam views daily. The platforms are being ruthless because their entire valuation depends on users not getting bored. If a user's feed becomes an endless scroll of generic slop, they close the app. If the user leaves, the ad revenue vanishes. The platform dies.
But this brings up a massive technical question. If the watermarks are easy to strip and people are using 88-cent paraphrasing APIs to hide the machine origins, how are these platform antibodies catching the slop so effectively? How did the video platform know which 4.7 billion views to erase without a definitive digital fingerprint?
For video, they analyze user behavior metrics at an incredibly granular level. They look for unnatural watch time drop-offs, repetition algorithms in the audio transcripts, and engagement patterns that suggest viewers feel tricked.
Okay, that makes sense for video, but what about text?
For text, it's even more sophisticated. They don't need a watermark because generic commodity content has a distinct, recognizable shape.
A shape? You mean the actual structure of the argument?
Yes. There was a breakthrough study mentioned in our sources that analyzed over 61,000 stories. The researchers didn't look at the specific words. They used natural language processing to map the syntax trees.
Syntax trees?
Right. They stripped away the vocabulary entirely and just evaluated the structural skeleton of the writing. How are the sentences paced? Where are the transitions? How does the narrative arc resolve?
So they basically looked at the architectural blueprint of the content rather than the paint on the walls.
Exactly. And they found that machine-generated generic content invariably possesses a specific structural pathology. It over-explains the premise. It moves in a rigid, linear fashion. It completely lacks subplots, tangent thoughts, or narrative detours.
And crucially, it tidies things up way too neatly at the end, usually summarizing everything with a very obvious platitude-heavy conclusion.
Yes, exactly.
It lacks the messy, unpredictable rhythm of human thought.
It's sterile. Think about how a human expert explains a complex topic. We go on tangents. We use weird pacing to emphasize a point. Sometimes we leave a minor thread slightly unresolved because the real world is nuanced. Machines don't do that naturally. They are programmed to be helpful and conclusive.
Right.
So platforms don't need to scan for a hidden tracking code. They map the syntax and look for the overwhelming, predictable tidiness of slop.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because this exposes the massive trap for business leaders right now. So many agencies and marketing teams think they've unlocked the ultimate cheat code. They've built these highly efficient pipelines spitting out 5 blog posts a day. They are patting themselves on the back for driving their customer acquisition costs down by automating production.
Yeah, they think they're winning.
But a highly efficient engine that just spits out generic assets isn't a competitive advantage anymore. It is an accelerated route to total algorithm invisibility. You're optimizing for a metric, volume, that the distribution gatekeepers are actively punishing. So the fundamental question shifts. If platforms are aggressively hunting down and throttling commodity content, how do you adapt? You still have to market your products? You still have media spend to allocate?
You have to build content that is inherently expensive to fake. And I love that phrasing for the sources. Expensive to fake doesn't mean you need a Hollywood production budget. It means the content requires a high degree of human capital, specific lived experience, and proprietary insight.
The era of selling output volume is over. If an agency pitches you a retainer based purely on the number of articles they will deliver a month, walk away. The era of selling trusted intelligence is the only path forward. Marketing leaders need to pivot their entire strategy toward assets that an algorithm fundamentally cannot hallucinate.
Which means leaning heavily into proprietary data. If you are writing a piece on supply chain logistics and you just prompt a system to write 5 ways to optimize shipping, an API can replicate that in 2 seconds. It's slop. But if you interview your company's actual head of logistics, extract real failure data from last quarter's shipping bottleneck, and build a report analyzing how your specific team solve that localized problem, that is defensible. A machine cannot scrape that from the open web because it only exists inside your organization.
It's rooted in firsthand experience, and tied to that is the concept of attributable identity. You need real, verified experts with actual track records attached to your brand's insights.
And claiming human authenticity when you don't actually have it creates a fatal liability. Look at the cautionary tale of the peer review company highlighted in our sources. They offered academic review services and marketed themselves aggressively as having zero machine involvement. They guaranteed 100% human-verified authentication.
And it turned out they were staffed entirely by automated agents, literally machines cosplaying as human academics, from the customer support chat all the way up to the reviewers themselves, just a network of code wearing digital tweed jackets.
It's a surreal example, but the business implication is severe. In a landscape where trust is the only scarce asset, they committed the ultimate sin. They destroy their attributable identity. Once that trust evaporates, your brand equity is zero. You cannot recover from that kind of algorithmic and public penalty.
So how do decision makers actually operationalize this? How do you test if your current marketing pipeline is vulnerable to these platform antibodies? Our sources outline a brutal framework called the 10-minute audit that every CMO should mandate this week.
It's a harsh mirror, but necessary. The 10-minute audit requires you to look at every single asset your team produces. A landing page, a white paper, a social campaign. Look at the core insight of the piece and ask yourself one question. If a competitor used the exact same basic prompt, could they publish something functionally similar within 10 minutes?
Let's apply that to a hypothetical. Say you're a B2B SaaS company, and your latest blog post is the top trends in cloud computing for 2026. It summarizes 3 news articles and gives generic advice about scaling servers. If your competitor asks an automated tool for a blog post on 2026 cloud trends, do they get the exact same structural shape?
They get the exact same shape, the same pacing, and the same sterile conclusions. If the answer to the 10-minute audit is yes, then that piece of content is not building brand equity. It is a liability. You're just waiting for the platform's digital immune system to flag it, throttle your reach, and spike your customer acquisition cost.
You know, reading through these strategy documents, the anecdote that really cemented this concept for me wasn't about B2B marketing or media spend at all. It was an analogy about writing a eulogy.
Oh, the eulogy example. It strips away all the business jargon and perfectly highlights the mechanics of defensible content.
Think about the mechanics of writing a eulogy for a loved one. It involves this massive, irreducible complexity. You're trying to evoke highly specific personal memories. You have to balance the pacing, trying to make a room full of people laugh, and then carefully pivoting to make them reflect and cry. You're constantly adjusting the tone based on inside jokes and a shared lived history that maybe only a few dozen people in the entire world actually understand.
The syntax mapping we discussed earlier. A eulogy breaks all the rules. It is deeply, intensely specific, and structurally unpredictable.
Exactly. The human brain has an endless capacity for that kind of highly contextual, nuanced creation. The author of that piece noted that if they sat down to write the exact same eulogy again the very next day, the structure would be completely different.
Because human emotion and memory are fluid.
Right. They react to the moment. That profound human specificity, that beautiful emotional messiness, is the ultimate moat against generic machine content.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the strategic shift for business leaders becomes incredibly clear. The debate happening in boardrooms right now shouldn't be, do we allow our teams to use automated writing tools or not? That is a debate from 3 years ago. The tools are here. They are integrated into your basic software suites.
The genie is entirely out of the bottle. You can't put it back. And trying to ban it just makes your team slower than the competition.
The actual debate you need to be having is, where does this technology improve our operational speed without degrading our distinctiveness, our credibility, or our trust? If you are utilizing these systems simply to manufacture a higher volume of the exact same generic commodities, you are actively eroding your brand's reach. You're optimizing for invisibility.
So what does this all mean? It means that content touched by a machine is rapidly becoming the baseline of the internet. It is the floor, not the ceiling. The strategic divide for your business going forward is no longer human versus machine. It is generic versus defensible.
And navigating that divide successfully requires a fundamental restructuring of your workflows and your KPIs. You have to stop measuring success by the quantity of output.
Audit your workflows today, not next quarter. Not when you get around to planning next year's media budget. Run the 10-minute audit today to ensure your brand is investing in proprietary data, firsthand experience, and verified identity. Build content that an algorithm, a distribution platform, and most importantly, a human buyer would all agree is actually worth keeping around.
Because the baseline for what gets algorithmic distribution has been permanently raised. You either meet that new standard with unique, expensive to fake value, or you vanish entirely into the slop.
But before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a thought to chew on. Something that's been bothering me as we've unpacked the mechanics of all this. Let's say the platforms win. Let's say every major network successfully builds these incredibly precise digital antibodies. They use syntax mapping and behavioral metrics to perfectly filter out all the generic, low-effort commodity content from our feeds. If they succeed, will the internet actually become a better, more useful place than it was 5 years ago?
That's a great question.
Or are we heading toward a reality where only the absolute wealthiest enterprise brands have the massive resources required to craft the bespoke, proprietary premium content needed to bypass the gatekeepers?
It is a genuinely sobering thought regarding the future of the web. If verified trust, proprietary data, and deep human specificity are the only currencies the algorithms accept, who actually gets to afford them?
Will the major platforms just evolve into gated communities for luxury, enterprise-grade content, locking out smaller voices? The next time you're scrolling through your professional feed and you see that invisible allergy label proving machine contact on a post, ask yourself not just who made it, but who could actually afford the human capital to make it visible. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks for listening. And don't forget to subscribe.